Starting in 2017, Annabel Allen of Halifax, England, systematically defrauded her friends, family, and others with various large-scale scams, driven by her obsession with money and her inability to keep up with her mounting debts. She used her position as a bank employee to conceal the shady nature of her activities and to convince people to invest with her. Allen left her own brother saddled with nearly $22,000 of debt by failing to pay back loans that she fraudulently took out in his name, landing him in a months-long fight to prove his innocence. After a court judgment was made against him, the unpaid loans also negatively impacted his credit score, prompting him to cooperate with prosecutors in a criminal case against his sister. In total, Allen scammed her victims out of more than $630,000 over a 6-year period. After becoming suspicious about her activities, the bank she worked for suspended and then fired her. She was also arrested and was out on bail when she started a new job at a car dealership where she took more than $47,000 from customers who thought they were buying vehicles that were never delivered, while a large amount of the 6-figure sum that Allen stole was recycled back to investors. Around $214,000 has never been accounted for. When customers failed to receive promised returns on their investments and began asking where their money was, Allen made excuses and sent them forged checks that bounced. She also furnished fake letters from a lawyer and the police, reassuring frustrated victims that the scheme was real. Allen admitted to several fraud charges in 2024 and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. She remains on the hook to repay the remaining balance of stolen funds that she owes. Number 22. Michael Kirk Moore Jr. In January of 2023, a plastic surgeon and 3 accused co-conspirators were accused of doling out fake COVID-19 vaccines and selling fraudulent vaccination cards for $50 apiece in Utah's Salt Lake City region. According to federal prosecutors, 58-year-old Dr. Michael Kirk Moore Jr. and his accomplices destroyed more than $28,000 worth of government-issued vaccine doses and sold more than 1,900 phony vaccine cards between May of 2021 and September of 2022, profiting to the tune of around $97,000. Court documents state that customers who wanted a fraudulent vaccination card were required to pass a test by naming someone who had already obtained a phony card from Moore and his accomplices. The person was then provided with a link to a website for an organization and told to make a $50 donation in exchange for their fake card. Despite these precautions, 2 undercover agents managed to obtain fraudulent vaccine cards at Moore's plastic surgery clinic. During the investigation, they learned that saline shots were administered to children at their parents' request in order to make the kids believe they had received the COVID vaccine. Authorities charged Moore, his office manager, Carrie D. Burgoyne, his receptionist, Sandra Flores, and his neighbor, Kristen Jackson Anderson, with conspiracy to defraud the United States. Conspiracy to convert, sell, convey, and dispose of government property, and conversion, sale, conveyance, and disposal of government property, and aiding and abetting. Additionally, Moore and Kristen Jackson Anderson are accused of being members of a secret group that seeks to liberate the medical profession from government and industry conflicts of interest. Updates on the case have not been forthcoming, but records show that the case is ongoing. Number 21. Sherry Von Brooks. When money mysteriously began to vanish from 85-year-old Evelyn Nicholson's home in the English town of Stourbridge in 2014, her family installed a hidden camera in an effort to get to the bottom of the situation. Soon enough, they were watching footage of Nicholson's caretaker, 20-year-old Sherry Von Brooks, taking cash from the senior citizen's purse. In the video, Brooks could be seen looking around as if to make sure Nicholson wasn't watching before she dug her hand into the victim's purse and began stuffing money into her pocket. The young woman stole less than $40, but she admitted to stealing on previous occasions, and the judge considered her caretaker relationship to Nicholson as an aggravating factor in what the judge hoped would serve as an example to other caretakers about the consequences of stealing. Brooks was sentenced to 26 weeks in a young offenders detention facility. Number 20. Linda D'Souza Abreu and Linton Weirick. During the summer of 2024, footage of a corrections officer being intimate with an inmate in a London jail cell went viral, triggering a police investigation into the incident. Identified as 31-year-old Linda D'Souza Abreu, the guard quit her job at HMP Wandsworth amid the scandal. In 2023, she and her husband Nathan were featured in a Channel 4 documentary about swingers called Open House, and the former jail employee is believed to have an OnlyFans account. D'Souza Abreu's sister, Andrina, told Mail Online that she had warned Linda not to mix her lifestyle with her work. Linda apparently didn't listen, and she was arrested at Heathrow Airport shortly after the video surfaced as she tried to catch a flight out of the country. The prisoner in the clip was identified as Linton Weirick, who's serving 4.5 years for a home burglary. When the story first broke, his girlfriend was 7 months pregnant. Her health was reportedly affected by the upsetting footage, which was captured by Weirick's cellmate. D'Souza Abreu remains free on bail on pending misconduct charges as she awaits her next court date. The investigation into the case is reportedly ongoing. Number 19. Karen Van Plu. 77-year-old Elizabeth Van Plu was deaf, suffering from a chronic lung condition, and had limited mobility when someone set fire to her home in Nottinghamshire, England, in December of 2021. Unable to escape the blaze, she died from burns and smoke inhalation. A look into Elizabeth's finances revealed that her bank had blocked her debit card from being able to conduct transactions the day before the fire. Upon further investigation, police discovered that the elderly woman's daughter-in-law, 44-year-old Karen Van Plu, had routinely drained money from the account, amounting to thousands of dollars in stolen funds. She was also in debt and knew that her husband stood to inherit half of Elizabeth's estate in the event of her death. After Elizabeth's bank put a block on her debit card, Karen accompanied the senior citizen to the financial institution where she attempted, unsuccessfully, to get the block removed. She was further implicated in the crime by surveillance footage, which showed the accused arsonist arriving at the home shortly after midnight, leaving about a half hour later, and then returning to the property to discover the fire and raise the alarm. Because Elizabeth was a heavy smoker, investigators faced the added challenge of proving that the fire couldn't have been started by a smoldering cigarette butt. Authorities finally charged Karen with murder more than 9 months after the deadly blaze, after coming up with enough evidence to show that the fire could have only been started by directly applying a flame to the victim's bed. A jury found Karen guilty as charged in May of 2024 following a 4-week trial. She was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 32 years. Number 18. Joseph Hopper and Jason Hopper. In October of 2022, police were called to the Berlin, Wisconsin home of a man who claimed that a father and son had offered him $40,000 to kill the elder man's other son. According to law enforcement, 62-year-old Joseph Anthony Hopper and 38-year-old Jason P. Hopper wanted the victim dead over some property and money that they believed he'd conned his grandfather, Joseph's father, into bequeathing to him. The man who claimed that the Hoppers had solicited him for murder told police that the suspects first approached him about the matter 3 months earlier. He said that he was finally coming clean about the situation because he could no longer live with knowing about the suspects' sinister plans and keeping it to himself. According to the hitman, Joseph and Jason had offered him a $20,000 down payment plus another $20,000 once the job was done. He told law enforcement that Jason owned a lot of guns and planned to file the serial number off one of them for the purpose of the hitman using it as the murder weapon. During one conversation, the hitman asked Joseph what happened to blood is thicker than water. In response, Joseph made it abundantly clear that he had absolutely no reservations or second thoughts about wanting to follow through with the murder. He also reportedly warned the hitman that he would harm him if he went to the police. Police listened in on a phone call between the hitman and Joseph, who seemed to backtrack on his previous requests and wasn't interested in having any immediate work done. Joseph and Jason were nevertheless arrested on suspicion of solicitation of first-degree intentional homicide. According to authorities, both men denied wanting to kill the intended victim, and Joseph repeatedly claimed that he was a Christian. In May of 2024, Jason Hopper pleaded no contest to 2 counts of possession of a short-barreled shotgun or rifle. He was sentenced to a year of probation. The case against Joseph remains open, and a plea hearing is scheduled for August of 2024. Number 17. Hasib bin Golem Rabbi and Omar Golem Rabbi. 59-year-old Golem Rabbi and his wife, 57-year-old Shemaima Rabbi, were found dead from multiple gunshot wounds at their San Jose, California home in April of 2016. Chilling messages were scrawled across the wall, including, "Sorry, my first killing was clumsy," and "I can't be like you telling a lie. I can't love someone without telling them." Relatives made the horrifying discovery after the couple's teenage sons claimed they were away at an anime convention and stopped answering their phones. 22-year-old Hasib bin Golem Rabbi and his younger brother Omar were both arrested on suspicion of murder 3 days later. Hasib reported he confessed to killing his mother and father, but claimed that a stranger had assaulted him and forced him to shoot his father. He told police that he didn't know who killed his mother. Omar told a much different story, claiming that Hasib had committed the double homicide and that there were no intruders present. The case against Omar was eventually dropped due to a lack of evidence, but the case against Hasib moved forward, and he represented himself during his trial. He tried to pin the murders on Omar, claiming that his younger brother was spoiled and resented their parents. According to Hasib, Omar had talked him into taking the blame for the crime. It was a much different story than he told during an earlier jailhouse interview with the San Francisco Chronicle, when he said he wanted to make it clear that Omar wasn't involved in the murders. Prosecutors accused Hasib of being jealous of the attention Omar received from their parents and motivated by greed. They argued that Hasib's motives were financial, while conceding that the true motive may never be known. There was also speculation among sources that the rabbis disapproved of their son's orientation. In October of 2018, Hasib was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 enhancements for using a firearm, and 2 special circumstances of lying in wait. His motion for a new trial was denied, and he was sentenced to life without parole. Number 16. Turigua Inaru. 29-year-old Turigua Inaru was already serving jail time in Osceola County, Florida in March of 2023 when she was accused of trying to hire fellow inmates to murder her family and an assistant state attorney. According to authorities, Inaru asked her cellmates if they knew anyone who would kill her parents and grandparents and claimed that she would receive a $2 million inheritance if the intended victims died. She reportedly offered to pay $50,000 per victim and said that she would gladly do it herself if she couldn't find someone else to carry out the murders. At the time, Inaru was being held in custody following her arrest in late 2022 for threatening her former co-workers at Disney World. When she began to talk about wanting people dead, her cellmates informed a corrections officer of her plan. An undercover officer posing as an inmate was assigned to her cell while detectives worked to uncover evidence linking Inaru to the murder-for-hire plot. In addition to wanting her family killed, she was accused of cyberstalking the assistant state attorney who was prosecuting her cases and saying that she wanted him to suffer. She remains held without bond on 3 counts of attempted premeditated first-degree murder, stalking, and 4 violations of conditional release. Number 15. Nathan Carman. In September 2016, a commercial ship's crew spotted a young man adrift in a lifeboat off the coast of Rhode Island. 22-year-old Nathan Carman had been floating hopelessly for 8 days after his boat sank in the Atlantic Ocean during an overnight fishing trip. His mother, 54-year-old Linda Carman, had died in the sinking. The tragedy came 3 years after the suspicious death of Nathan's grandfather, a wealthy Connecticut real estate developer named John Chakalos, who was fatally shot in 2013. Investigators and relatives suspected Nathan of killing Chakalos, but without enough evidence to charge him, he remained free. When Linda died 3 years later, Nathan had almost completely blown through the $550,000 he had inherited from his grandfather. As an only child, he stood to gain $7 million when his mother died, leading to suspicions that he tried to hasten the process by killing Linda, whose body was never found. In 2018, Linda's sisters, Nathan's aunts, sued him to block him from inheriting any of his grandfather's estate. Despite their suspicions that Nathan was a 2-time killer, he continued to walk free until 2022, when federal authorities charged him with murder on the high seas and 7 fraud-related counts. Prosecutors accused Nathan of deliberately scuttling his boat, which was reportedly found stripped of parts that would have enabled him to sink it intentionally. It was an opinion shared by Linda's life insurance company which refused to pay out on the policy. If convicted as charged, Nathan would have faced life in prison for the murder charge and up to 30 years for each fraud count. He was never brought to justice, however, because he was found dead in his prison cell while awaiting trial in June of 2023. Nathan's defense attorney, Martin J. Minella, expressed shock over his client's death, telling the New York Times that he had been looking forward to sharing the truth about Nathan in court. Not a single family member was at the funeral, which was paid for by Minella. Number 14. Michaela Ziegler and Danielle King. In September of 2021, a Westchester, Pennsylvania doctor named Romaro Naidu discovered that someone was stealing money from his bank and credit accounts. The theft dated back to nearly a year earlier, right after Naidu had hired 22-year-old Michaela Ziegler and 25-year-old Danielle King to work in positions that gave them access to his finances. Detectives determined that the thieves had stolen $450,000 from the doctor. They placed the money in their bank, PayPal, and Apple Card accounts and used it to pay on their student loans. The women were also accused of sending the money to their boyfriends and family and spending it on furniture, bills, healthcare, tanning sessions, tattoos, hair care, veterinary bills, and travel. Investigators also discovered evidence that Ziegler and King had reached out to a real estate agent in an attempt to sell two of Dr. Naidu's properties, which were valued at over $1 million. The agent received signed paperwork and listed the properties online until Naidu's family discovered the listings and had them taken down. Even more disturbingly, the suspects had reportedly tried to change Naidu's will before abruptly quitting their jobs in August of 2021. In 2023, King and Ziegler were charged with theft by unlawful taking, conspiracy, dealing in unlawful proceeds, forgery, identity theft, and more. The case appears to be ongoing. Number 13. Jamie Mann. In April of 2022, the owner of Atlas Towing Salvage and Marine Services in Ormond Beach, Florida, noticed some payroll discrepancies. He consulted his accountant, who discovered that the business's office manager, 35-year-old Jamie Mann, had given herself a $5 hourly raise on 3 separate occasions over a 3-year period, doubling the $15 per hour pay to $30 per hour. She had also made unauthorized payments to herself for overtime and on-call time. Mann was the only employee with access to the payroll, according to the owner, who had never given her permission to raise her pay. Under the pay rate that the rogue employee was hired at, her annual salary should have been around $41,000. After raising her own pay, she grossed nearly $123,000 in 1 year. Altogether, she was accused of stealing over $200,000. Mann's bank records indicated that she spent a large portion of the excess pay on home improvement, Amazon purchases, amusement park tickets, and other leisure activities. She was charged with felony grand theft and released on $50,000 bail while awaiting her next court date. Records show that Mann was convicted of the charge in 2023 and is serving a 13-year probation sentence, which means she'll remain under supervision until April of 2036. Number 12. Linda Mancy. In February of 2023, business owners Jay and Jordan Berkowitz contacted police in Bridgeport, Pennsylvania, with their suspicions that a longtime employee had stolen a large amount of money from their stores. 53-year-old Linda Mancy of Tuckerton, New Jersey, had been employed by the Berkowitzes since 2015 and had worked in various positions that gave her access to the owner's finances, including as a bookkeeper and, more recently, as the Vice President of Finance and Human Resources. She was accused of stealing $1.2 million from Arnold's Office Furniture and Sun Line Supply Company between January 2016 and early 2023, when she was fired due to the theft allegations. According to Montgomery County District Attorney Kevin Steele, Mancy used much of the money for everyday personal expenses, including phone bills, legal fees, online gambling, and her incarcerated son's commissary. She also splurged on luxuries like jewelry, shopping sprees, and travel, including a trip to Miami for her son's 21st birthday, rental cars, airline tickets, and tickets to sports games. Mancy's wanton spending caused significant financial hardship for the Berkowitzes and landed her in trouble with the law. In July of 2023, she was charged with felony counts of theft by unlawful taking, theft by deception, receiving stolen property, and forgery. The case appears to be ongoing. Number 11. Graziella Avetti. As a paid caretaker, 61-year-old Graziella Avetti was entrusted with looking out for the safety and best interests of the people she looked after. But she was accused of doing the exact opposite in October of 2018 when she was arrested for stealing from the home of a woman in her 90s in Nottingham, England. The victim's family had installed a hidden camera inside an alarm clock just days earlier, after more than $25,000 worth of jewelry vanished from the residence. While working an overnight shift, Avetti could be seen rummaging through a closet and stealing $165 from the elderly woman's daughter's purse, then stuffing the wad of cash into her bra. She initially denied the theft but admitted to it when confronted with the evidence. Avetti was sentenced to 160 hours of unpaid work in lieu of jail time and was ordered to pay nearly $1,000 in court costs. No one was charged in connection with the jewelry theft. Number 10. Felix Conda. 70-year-old William Figueroa died from a heart attack in his Bronx apartment in December of 2023. He had no will or established next of kin, leaving the borough's only full-time decedent property agent, 62-year-old Felix Conda, responsible for emptying his apartment and handling his belongings. 10 days after Figueroa's death, Conda visited his cramped one-bedroom apartment to assess the items. Apparently unaware that the deceased man's home surveillance camera was recording, he could be seen pocketing money and some other valuables. Rather than placing them into evidence bags like he was supposed to do, Figueroa's niece, 63-year-old Elizabeth Ayala, watched the footage on her uncle's cell phone. The scene that unfolded more closely resembled a ransacking than a legitimate professional investigation. Conda reportedly admitted to taking nearly $500 in cash, a chain, and a ring from the apartment. He described his actions as a screw-up, telling the New York Post that he simply didn't have any evidence bags with him at the time. Ayala didn't believe the claim, and she was pretty certain that Figueroa had a lot more than $500 in his apartment when he died. She had planned to use the money to pay for his burial since she couldn't afford it herself. But now that the money was gone, she had no choice but to let her uncle be laid to rest in a potter's field on Hart Island, where the city's poor and forgotten deceased residents are buried in mass graves. Furious about the situation, she turned the security video over to Conda's superiors and he promptly quit his job. Bronx public administrator Matilda Sanchez seemed almost sympathetic towards Conda, who she described as really basically an honest guy who failed to follow protocol that day for whatever reason. She nevertheless vowed to improve the practices that are carried out by the employees who work under her in an effort to prevent a similar incident from happening again in the future. Number 9. Lucy Horton. After noticing that money was disappearing from her staff room, in 2014, 39-year-old Siobhan Meadows installed a hidden camera at her hair salon in the English village of Hartlepool. She was shocked to discover that the culprit was a long-time employee who she had taken under her wing 7 years earlier. In the video, 23-year-old Lucy Horton could be seen going into Meadows' purse and taking cash 3 times in a single day, amounting to over $500 in stolen funds. Meadows was extremely disappointed and disheartened to discover that the thief was someone she trusted and even invited to family functions. She fired Horton, who pleaded guilty to a theft charge but never explained her actions. The judge imposed a strict curfew and required Horton to wear an ankle monitor for 8 weeks. She was also ordered to pay back all the money she stole from Meadows along with a surcharge. Number 8. Karen Reed. On a frigid and stormy winter night in January of 2022, 46-year-old Boston, Massachusetts police officer John O'Keefe was found clinging to life in the snow outside the home of a retired fellow officer. He was pronounced dead at a local hospital several hours later. O'Keefe died from the combined effects of blunt force injuries and hypothermia, but the medical examiner was unable to distinguish whether he was murdered or if he succumbed to a horrific tragedy. Investigators surmised that the slain police officer had been fatally mowed down by his drunken girlfriend, 44-year-old Karen Reed, who had dropped him off at the late-night house party hours earlier. Reed claimed that she left after watching O'Keefe enter the home because she wasn't sure if she was supposed to join him inside. She denied any involvement in her boyfriend's death but was charged with second-degree murder manslaughter while operating under the influence of alcohol, and leaving the scene of personal injury and death. The case deeply divided communities in and around Boston, with Reed's supporters turning up in droves outside the courthouse while others gathered to voice their shared opinion that she's a cold-blooded cop killer who deserves to rot in prison for the rest of her life. Reed's high-profile defense team argued that she had been set up by members of a corrupt system and was taking the fall for someone else's actions, while the prosecution depicted her as an angry girlfriend who backed her SUV into O'Keefe while intoxicated behind the wheel, then left him to die in the snow. After finally going to trial in 2024, the case ended in a hung jury. Prosecutors plan to retry the case, but the outcome marked a victory for Reed, whose attorneys are equally eager to continue defending her during the next trial. During the jury's deliberations, someone captured footage of Reed's married attorney, Alan Jackson, embracing her from behind outside a local restaurant. In the clip, Jackson could be seen wrapping his arms around Reed's midsection and chest while nuzzling his face toward her shoulder. Neither Jackson nor Reed have commented on the photo, which many Reed supporters have accused of being fake or AI generated. The person who took the photo told the New York Post that the situation looked wrong and inappropriate. So I just grabbed the closest phone and took a picture. Speaking with Fox News, former Washington, D.C. homicide detective Ted Williams said that if the photo is authenticated, it could be detrimental to Reed's defense during the next trial. The outcome of the controversial case remains to be seen. Number 7. Nathaniel Jackson. After winning $20 million in the Illinois State Lottery in 1996, Jeffrey Dampier Jr. lost half of his newfound fortune to a divorce, with his ex-wife being granted half the money. Looking for a fresh start, he moved from Chicago to Tampa, Florida, where he met his second wife, Crystal Jackson. Dampier covered the costs of moving Crystal's sisters, Victoria and Terry, to Tampa. He also financed the startup costs for the family's gourmet popcorn business. During the early 2000s, he began having an affair with his sister-in-law, Victoria, who was dating a man named Nathaniel Jackson. In 2005, Victoria lured Dampier to her home, claiming to have car trouble. When he arrived, he was ambushed by Nathaniel, who tied him up and forced him into the back of a van at gunpoint. He beat Dampier with the gun and demanded money while Victoria drove. Dampier failed to cooperate, prompted Nathaniel to hand Victoria the gun. When her efforts to get money from Dampier also failed, Nathaniel ordered her to shoot him and threatened to shoot her if she didn't comply. Victoria shot Dampier in the back of the head, killing him at the scene. In 2006, she was convicted of first-degree murder, armed kidnapping, and armed carjacking, and sentenced to 3 life terms. Nathaniel was found guilty of the same charges the following year and is also serving life without parole. Number 6. Joel Guy Jr. In 2016, 61-year-old Joel Guy Sr. and his wife, 55-year-old Lisa, made plans to retire after decades of working hard to secure a comfortable future. The couple put their home in Knoxville, Tennessee up for sale with plans to move back to their hometown of Kingsport, and they told their 28-year-old chronically unemployed son, Joel Guy Jr., that they would no longer continue to financially support him. Up until that point, the guys had paid the rent on their son's Baton Rouge apartment and had kept him afloat financially while he attended classes at various colleges but never acquired a degree. Knowing they would be on a fixed income, they decided it was time for Joel Jr. to finally learn how to be on his own. Just days before Joel Sr. and Lisa were due to move out of their house, they had their children over for one last Thanksgiving dinner there. 2 days later, after his siblings had left the residence, Joel Jr. stabbed his father to death in a frenzied knife attack while Lisa was out shopping. She met the same fate as her husband when she entered the home in a gruesome attempt to conceal evidence. Joel Jr. dismembered his parents' corpse and tried to dissolve their body parts in bins full of acid. He also decapitated his mother and boiled her head in a pot on the stove. Joel carried out the sinister plan because he was unwilling to financially support himself and wanted to cash in on his parents' $500,000 life insurance policy so he didn't have to work. He was in the middle of trying to destroy Joel Sr. and Lisa's bodies when he left the house to get medical treatment for a wound he sustained during the attacks. In the meantime, Lisa's co-worker summoned police to the home for a welfare check. Lisa had failed to show up for work without calling, and it was completely unlike her to do that. Officers discovered the horrific scene and quickly zeroed in on Joel Jr., who they identified as the owner of a notebook at the crime scene containing explicit details of the planned murders. Investigators also uncovered surveillance footage of Joel buying murder and first aid supplies, along with other evidence pointing toward his guilt. In 2020, a jury found Joel Guy Jr. guilty of first-degree murder, felony murder, and abuse of a corpse. He had requested the death penalty if convicted, but was sentenced to life without parole. In 2023, his appeal to overturn his sentence was denied. Number 5. The murder of Gregory Birch. Life changed dramatically for a 20-year-old forklift driver and new father named Gregory Birch in 2015 when he won $434,000 in the Georgia State Lottery. He used some of the proceeds to buy a house in the small city of Fitzgerald, where he lived with his girlfriend, Jasmine Hendricks, and their 2 young children. Birch was blissfully unaware that his recent winnings and his generosity had made him a target to jealous local criminals who thought he was flexing by buying gifts for neighborhood kids. Just 2 months after he won the lottery, a group of masked intruders fired gunshots through Birch's front door and forced their way into his home. He immediately started begging the intruders not to shoot him in front of Hendricks and the children, and even offered to give them his bank card, but they showed no mercy and shot him multiple times while ransacking his home for valuables. The thieves fled the scene with a few stolen cell phones and $200 cash. Hendricks fled to a neighbor for help, while Birch unfortunately died at the scene. Following a months-long investigation, 7 suspects were charged with malice murder, aggravated assault, armed robbery, home invasion, possession of a firearm in the commission of a crime, and more. The first suspect to go to trial, Nathaniel Baker, was convicted on 13 counts, including murder, and was sentenced to life without parole. In 2017, Wayne Malik Jordan and the Brentice Overstreet were convicted on 14 counts and sentenced to life without parole. Ernest Holcomb pleaded guilty to armed robbery, street gang terrorism, and escaping from jail. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, and Javelle Johnson was convicted of the same crimes and also received a 20-year sentence. Rosalind Swain, the getaway driver, is serving 5 years for attempted armed robbery. The outcome of the case for the 7th suspect, Kayana Dias, is unclear. Number 4. Yaloma Curry Walker. Cleveland firefighter William Walker had been married to his wife, Yaloma Curry Walker, for just 4 months when he was mercilessly gunned down by a stranger as he arrived at his home in November 2013. After William's death, Yaloma put his belongings in a storage unit and moved to North Carolina. William's car was found abandoned in a parking lot with his cremated ashes inside, which didn't seem like something a grieving widow would do. Investigators identified the shooter as 24-year-old Ryan Doughty, who had been enlisted to commit the murder, along with 20-year-old Christopher Hine. The men were recruited by Yaloma's teenage daughter's boyfriend, 20-year-old Chad Paget, who claimed that Yaloma had offered to pay him to find a hitman. Yaloma provided the 3 young men with a $1,000 down payment, which they split amongst themselves, but she never paid the full promised amount of $10,000 because she was never able to collect on William's life insurance like she planned. According to prosecutors, Yaloma had racked up a large amount of credit card debt in William's name prior to his murder. She was afraid William would find out about the debt and also wanted to cash in on his $100,000 life insurance policy. After the murder, she learned that William had not yet changed the beneficiary on the policy, and the money went to his ex-wife. Paget, Hine, and Doughty all took plea agreements and received life sentences with minimum terms ranging from 18 to 28 years. Yaloma maintained her innocence but was found guilty of aggravated murder, conspiracy, and felonious assault. She was sentenced to life without parole. Number 3. Alan Hruby. 50-year-old John Hruby, his wife, 48-year-old Joy Tinker Hruby, and their teenage daughter, Catherine Hruby, were shot dead inside their Duncan, Oklahoma home on an October evening in 2014. The investigation into their murders began 5 days later after a housekeeper discovered their bodies. It didn't take long for investigators to narrow their focus on John and Joy's 19-year-old son, Alan Hruby, who was living at the University of Oklahoma's dorms in Norman, roughly 80 miles from the crime scene, for over a year leading up to the murders. The Rubies had struggled with Alan's shopping addiction and his obsession with spending money. He had a taste for the finer things in life, and he financed his lifestyle with money that wasn't his. In 2013, Alan was arrested for spending $5,000 with his grandmother's stolen credit card during a 6-week vacation in Europe that his parents paid for. His obsession with material goods was especially evident in a disturbing, now deleted blog post, which stated that there was no bigger rush than swiping one's credit card at a cash register and waiting to see that the charge was approved. During another alarming incident about 2 years before the murders, Alan was accused of assaulting his mother during an argument about money. At the time of his parents' and sisters' deaths, Alan was on probation for the charges he had made with his grandmother's stolen credit card. Authorities held him on a probation violation until they had enough evidence to charge him with John, Joy, and Catherine's murders. According to prosecutors, Alan killed his family because he owed money to a loan shark and believed he would inherit his parents' money and assets. The state planned to pursue the death penalty but honored the wishes of Alan's surviving relatives for a plea deal which would come with a life sentence without parole. The request was made by Alan's grandfather, who said that he didn't think he would live long enough to see the justice carried out in the case of a death penalty sentence due to the lengthy appeals process that comes with it. As part of the plea deal, Alan waived his right to appeal the case and was banned from speaking with the media and his relatives. He was also required to explain what happened on the day of the murders, but was sobbing so hard in the courtroom that he was almost impossible to understand. His surviving family members were happy knowing that they'll never hear from him again as he spends the rest of his life behind bars on 3 first-degree murder convictions. Today's topic was requested by Yo Levin and Henry Watt 9764. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comment section below. Number 2. The murder of Lee Cost. 78-year-old retired stockbroker Lee R. Cost was found dead with gunshot wounds in the bedroom of his Canton, Ohio home in May of 2008. The murder came roughly 8 months after he won $250,000 in the Ohio State Mega Millions game. Between then and when he was killed, Cost's home was burglarized on 3 separate occasions, indicating that he had become a target due to his recent lottery winnings. While investigating the senior citizen's murder, police discovered that he had taken 18-year-old Porsche J. Sweet out to dinner on the evening that he was killed. Afterward, Sweet text messaged Cost's address to her roommate, 18-year-old Megan C. Harper, and indicated which door she had left unlocked. Harper and the young women's other 2 roommates, Terrence Meyer and Antonio Taylor, took a taxi to the elderly man's neighborhood and barged into his house where the victim was laying in bed with Sweet. Terrence Meyer pistol-whipped Cost and demanded the PIN numbers to his credit cards while Sweet and Harper rummaged through the home for credit cards and money. Meyer shot the victim in the head, then fled the scene with Sweet and the other co-conspirators in Cost's stolen Jaguar. Later that night, the vehicle was pulled over for speeding. Evidence from inside the car, including the murder weapon, connected Meyer to the crime through DNA. All 4 suspects were charged with murder. Sweet and Harper took plea deals and are serving life with the possibility of parole after 28 years, while Taylor also took a plea deal and will become eligible for parole after serving 23 years. Meyer pleaded guilty to aggravated murder, aggravated robbery, and aggravated burglary and was sentenced to life without parole. For those of you who haven't had your daily dose of They Will Kill You, stay tuned until after number 1 because we've got when bounty hunters go wrong lined up. Number 1. Devonta Mathis. 60-year-old Mohammed Hussein was working a late-night shift at a gas station in Mesquite, Texas, in June of 2024 when a masked man entered the store and shot him multiple times. The shooter grabbed a bunch of lottery tickets and fled the scene. In the meantime, Hussein stumbled out to the parking lot and collapsed. He died from his injuries at a nearby hospital. The gunman was still at large hours later when he entered another gas station and shot 32-year-old Gopi Krishna Dasari. Surveillance footage showed Dasari backing away with his hands up as the killer shot him without hesitation. Identified by police as 21-year-old Devonta Mathis, The accused killer reportedly admitted to committing the shootings because he wanted to steal lottery tickets in hopes that he would win enough money to buy an apartment. According to police, he said he had no regrets about his actions and complained about how a white clerk would have complied with him while insisting he wasn't racist. Mathis is now facing 2 murder charges and remains in custody as he awaits trial. 7 bounty hunters were arrested following the fatal shooting of Jalen Milan in Clarksville, Tennessee on April the 23rd of 2017. The 24-year-old victim, reported as being the father of 3 young children, was seated in the back of a sedan that was parked outside a Walmart neighborhood market on the night of the incident. Court records detailed how the suspects, who'd been hired to arrest an individual for skipping out on bond, had approached the vehicle in which Milan sat with their weapons drawn. The bounty hunters then reportedly smashed the car's windows without warning, prompting the driver to speed away from them, believing the car had been ambushed by gang members. The suspects subsequently opened fire on the fleeing car, striking Milan in the back and chest. They then got into their own vehicle and proceeded to pursue the car they'd targeted for a distance of roughly 7 miles. A short time after the shooting had occurred, Milan succumbed to his injuries. It was reported that the suspects eventually realized that the individual they'd been searching for wasn't in the vehicle they'd fired upon and consequently abandoned the chase. None of the occupants of the car in which Milan had been shot were wanted on outstanding charges, and none of them had been armed, according to subsequent reports. All 7 of the bounty hunters involved were initially charged in connection to Milan's death, and 2 of them reportedly reached plea deals with prosecutors in exchange for their testimonies. Following a criminal trial that lasted nearly 3 weeks, however, the defendants were found not guilty on all counts, except for Joshua Young, aged 28, who was convicted of reckless endangerment with a deadly weapon. Defense attorneys had argued that their clients had simply been acting in self-defense when they opened fire, as the vehicle that contained the victim had struck several of the bounty hunters in the process of fleeing the scene. Number 6. Justin Behag. Justin Behag, who regularly appeared on the reality show Dog the Bounty Hunter during the series' first 6 seasons, was taken into police custody in January of 2020. The 36-year-old bounty hunter was alleged to have violated the terms of his probation, which banned him from using intoxicants of any kind. The court order reportedly stemmed from a past domestic violence charge on which the former television personality had been convicted. Authorities in Edgewater, Colorado, where Behag resided, had been alerted to the man's alleged probation violations by Lisa Chapman, the daughter of the suspect's former co-star, Dog the Bounty Hunter. Behag had reportedly engaged in a contentious social media feud with Chapman roughly a month prior to his arrest. On January the 12th, Edgewater police officers searched Behag's home, where they reportedly found evidence of marijuana use and noted that the man himself smelled strongly of alcohol. It was then that they placed him under arrest. Number 5. Jeremy Hughes. A Berkeley County Sheriff's deputy was sent to a local mulch supplier in Moncks Corner, South Carolina, on the afternoon of November the 22nd of 2021, after a store employee had contacted the police to report a suspicious person. The responding officer learned that shortly after 12 p.m., a man who'd identified himself as Brian Williams had walked into the store carrying a shotgun and a holstered pistol. He was also described as wearing tactical clothing with a shirt that had the word police printed on the front of it. He claimed to be a U.S. Marshal in search of a man dressed in all orange. The armed individual eventually left the store, but then reportedly called the business back a short time later to inform the employees that he'd located the person for whom he'd been looking and told them they could therefore relax. The deputy dispatched to the scene obtained the phone number from which the suspect had called the store. During the ensuing investigation, it emerged that the man who'd claimed to be Brian Williams was actually a convicted felon by the name of Jeremy Hughes, who'd been working as a freelance bounty hunter on the day he entered the mulch store. On December the 1st, the 33-year-old was taken into custody and charged with impersonating a police officer. Number 4. The Lipstick Bounty Hunters. In March of 2013, a group of women from Orange County, California, calling themselves the Lipstick Bounty Hunters, assaulted a man whom they were trying to bring into custody. The incident reportedly occurred at an Arby's restaurant in Huntington Beach on the 18th of the month. The women had been in pursuit of 35-year-old Daniel Duval, who'd been released on bond while facing various drug and weapons charges. According to the owner of the Lipstick Bounty Hunters agency, Teresa Galt, she and her crew had been hired to arrest Duval after he'd paid only $1,000 of his $5,000 bail bond. As they were attempting to take the man into custody, Galt and her partners, who were dressed in pink outfits and armed, became involved in a physical altercation with Duval in the parking lot of the restaurant. During the struggle, the women reportedly shot him with a stun gun, pepper spray, and rubber bullets, severely injuring one of his eyes in the process. The entire incident was captured on video by Galt herself, who stated that recording the bounty hunters' detention attempts was standard procedure. Duval later filed a lawsuit against the Lipstick Bounty Hunters, claiming that he was no longer able to see out of his right eye due to the women's use of excessive force. Number 3. Dog the Bounty Hunter. Reality TV star Dwayne Chapman, who's better known by the alias Dog the Bounty Hunter, was served a $1.3 million defamation lawsuit in 2021, which stemmed from his alleged racist and homophobic behavior while producing the show Dog Unleashed. The accusations of Chapman's misconduct had arisen after the reality series, which had planned to follow the celebrity bounty hunter as he tracked violent fugitives across the United States, was cancelled mere weeks before it was scheduled to premiere. As detailed in the lawsuit filed by the president and CEO of Unleashed Entertainment, Michael Donovan, Chapman's actions during production breached contractual agreements. The 68-year-old had allegedly used racially charged language in reference to Black Lives Matter activists, and had also made several offhand comments deemed homophobic about an openly gay man. The lawsuit further claimed that the investigation into Chapman's alleged impropriety discovered that he'd illegally holstered a taser while filming an episode of the show in Virginia. As per state law, individuals convicted of a violent crime are prohibited from carrying a device such as the one referenced in the lawsuit. Chapman had previously been convicted of first-degree murder in 1976, and his possession of the taser was therefore considered illegal in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Chapman claimed the lawsuit malicious and bogus, while stating his intentions to pursue retaliatory legal action against Donovan. Number 2. Matador Recovery. On the night of February the 8th of 2021, 3 bounty hunters from the bail bonding company Matador Recovery descended on a house in a residential neighborhood of Nashville, Tennessee, which they believed belonged to a man they'd been tracking. According to a police report, the 3 suspects broke down the front door and charged inside before holding the homeowner, Lavaris Comer, and his 16-year-old son at gunpoint. They claimed to be looking for a man named Tavares, who'd allegedly failed to show up for a scheduled court appearance. After forcing their way into the residence, the bounty hunters reportedly knocked Comer to the ground and continued to point their weapons at him and the teenager while ignoring their insistence that the individual they were searching for wasn't there. The armed men, one of whom was later identified as the owner of Matador Recovery, 51-year-old Khalil Abdullah, initially didn't believe Comer's claims of innocence. However, they eventually realized that they'd entered the wrong house and promptly fled the scene. Comer contacted Nashville police to report the incident and was able to provide the authorities with the suspect's license plate number. Roughly 2 months later, Abdullah was positively identified by the authorities and taken into custody. He was charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and aggravated criminal trespass. It emerged that Abdullah had previously been arrested in 2014. His detainment had been related to an incident in which he'd allegedly broken into a woman's home in search of her husband, who was accused of not showing up to court for a traffic infraction. The 2 other bounty hunters involved in the ambush of Comer's residence had not yet been identified, as per the latest updates on the case. Number 1. Fabian Hector Herrera. On April the 23rd of 2021, bounty hunter Fabian Hector Herrera was sent to a condo unit in Palm Springs, California, to arrest a man named David Spann. Herrera had been hired by Justice Bail Bonds of Temecula after Spann had allegedly violated the terms of his bail bond by disabling the electronic monitoring device he'd been required to wear. The bounty hunter reportedly contacted Palm Springs police just before 2 a.m. to let them know he was about to take Spann into custody. Shortly thereafter, he was captured by the latter's doorbell security camera fruitlessly attempted to kick open the front door to his condo. Herrera, who was accompanied by his mother, Lisa Vargas, eventually gained access to the residence by breaking down the door with a sledgehammer. The bounty hunter subsequently called the police a second time to report that he was holding Span at gunpoint and was in need of support. 2 Palm Springs police officers arrived at the scene minutes later. Span, who was wielding a knife, demanded that Herrera and the officers leave immediately, but one of the policemen then reportedly deployed his taser, causing the homeowner to stumble backwards. The officers retreated, but Herrera proceeded to fire a single gunshot at Span, killing him instantly. Following the shooting, the officers arrested the bounty hunter, and he was consequently charged with murder. It would later emerge that Herrera wasn't actually a licensed bail agent, but a twice-convicted felon. He thus wasn't allowed to carry the firearm that he ultimately used to gun down Span that night. In the wake of this discovery, Herrera faced further charges of felon in possession of a gun, body armor, and ammunition. In November of 2021, he entered a plea of not guilty, and his trial readiness conference was scheduled for February the 3rd of 2022. Thanks for watching. Would you rather never be allowed to eat a cookie again, or never be allowed to eat vegetables again for the rest of your life? Let us know in the comments section below.